Hi, it's great to get that kind of bait to try and keep people in the room during my talk, so that's really exciting. Uh, the next thing I do have to say is an apology because when I created these slides, I always have ice cream on the brain. And so I'm cutting out these ice cream people, and then I was warned once I showed people the deck that you get really, really hungry for ice cream. So the surprise is not ice cream. I'm going to spoil that ahead. Yeah, so. Hi, I'm Tracy Hinds. As Michael said, we work together at the Node Foundation. I'm the Education Community Manager. I've also been working on some of the inclusivity efforts as of more recently. JiffASniff. I don't know if any of y'all have heard of that term. It's JavaScript is fun, and so Node is fun. If you try and reverse that, it's really hard to pronounce. But I do think that Node is fun, and so JavaScript is fun. So Node is 7 years old, and the Foundation's celebrated a birthday. We're going to take a look at how the Node community came to be, how the fork was great, trust me, how flawed we are as humans in a lot of our efforts, and how inclusivity has anything to do with all of this retrospection as well as future planning. So back when I first started programming, I was enjoying my code community like nothing else. I lived in Portland, Oregon, and there was a new meetup in town starting every week. People were chomping at the bit for the latest technologies, including Node, and they were happy to share it with others. So when I found a group that was starting that I had been keenly interested in starting myself, it was not Node, I offered support. I emailed, I DM'd the folks that were going to be starting that effort. And I got no response. So I was like, okay, well, I'm pretty new. Maybe I just don't know the right path to connect to people. So I messaged them on Meetup, and still no response. So I started attending the events more and more and gaining their trust. And they're still not really letting me in. And so maybe it's just out of them seeing an overeager beaver. But I was really excited to help out, and my mentor had also suggested that it would be a great way to get involved, and starting your own group as a newer person in programming or even in a city is a really tough thing to do, and he was trying to set me up for success. It turns out that they did not want my help, and they made that pretty clear, but after I found a niche, which was the weekend hack times, you needed to show up, and that's all you needed to do. You didn't need to be an expert. You needed to be a person there representing PyLadies to welcome people and make sure that they had somebody else to talk to. And I wrote Python. I just wasn't great at it, and that was enough. So I was there pretty much every weekend that year, except for when I was away at the first conferences I was attending. But then I attended the inaugural PDX Node. And Merlin Alberspire and Ben Acker had announced the event that was going to be hosted at Walmart Labs. And it was a really cool space, and I went. I was really excited, especially because I had just started writing JavaScript full-time at my day job, and we were starting to pick up Node, and my mentor was as well, and it was really exciting because I had this local, this new local thing that was going to help support me in learning that. And so I showed up, and the energy was really incredible. There's over 100 people, and in Portland, that's really rare for a meetup in general, and especially around a technology that was not as big at the time, such as Node. And so everybody was really excited. We stayed way after the meetup was supposed to end. And as I do, I approached the organizers, Merlin and Ben, and told them how excited I was about the group and all the cool things that we could do, just because I was a really excited attendee. And Ben saw my excitement and was just like, well, he doesn't have enough energy by himself to do, and they both had families, and he was just like, why don't you help? Why don't you help organize? And I kind of paused. I was just like, this dude, what is he thinking? He did not know me. That was the first time he had met me. And so I said yes, because that was awesome. I was like, yes, somebody wants my help. That gave me the courage to also write my first conference talk and give my first conference talk at Node PDX, which is an annual conference in Portland. And I went on to run JavaScript conferences as a hobby while working full-time. as an engineer. And when I shared the fun times with our attendees and the organizers, and we felt how awesome Node could be to participate in and form a community, even if it's just local. And there's nothing better, really honestly, for a new person in a community than to be valued, right? To be asked for help. And so for me, that was really powerful. Asking for help and making the space or getting out of the way for those who have the energy and enthusiasm to help, I think that's a huge legacy of Node and its community. I think that's a story that we have to protect. I know a lot of people who have similar stories. And I think that's what, that makes people feel wanted and supported to do the work that they're excited to do. So how does Node fit into this larger JS landscape? This is something that I hang out in the larger JavaScript community, and while Node can feel really big, sometimes it can also feel really small in some of the fights that we end up having. But Node, Node is a platform. Most of you know this. It's a set of APIs for JavaScript to do things that JavaScript was not necessarily intended to do. And without having a context switch, it can lower the barrier to writing full stack. Why should other programmers care about Node at all? And I think a lot of people have covered that over the past 2 days. Think about things like NPM, all the front-end folks using it, which relies on Node. That's what I think Ashley had the numbers, but it's like 5.7 million people. And anyone using WordPress, which runs 4.5% of the internet. These are important. There are important open source technological and community lessons to be learned here. We saw an exciting project of Node that a lot of people have invested and had invested their work at one point into the brink of real trouble. 2 years ago, our global project was down to 4 Node core maintainers. Some of you know this story, but I think that this context is really important. This doesn't address all the incredible work that was happening in our community and keeping the excitement alive and learning Node and consuming it, but we only had those 4 folks. So we're going to take a look at that. So there's this idea that our ability, or stalled ability, to get things done as individuals working towards a larger goal, such as maintaining and improving the Node project, is called community capacity. So this is our ability to promote or sustain the well-being of the community and its components, and that means individuals, that means organizations, it means social interactions, and the code base that we all rely on. So what I'd like to introduce as part of this is the idea of the tyranny of structurelessness. So bear with me. A lack of heavy organizations and process early on was pretty integral to Node code and community events happening. Many declared the lack of structure a way to keep contributors from being bogged down in process and approval. The fallacy here is that a lack of organization or structure is not structureless. Implicit structure grows from friendships, it grows from accidental elitism, which is just, it's unintentioned, and then also good intention, defensiveness to protect the quality of the code base. These silent imbalances of power are something I'm going to explore a little further when we talk about privilege and inclusivity. We couldn't fool ourselves into thinking that Node was going to continue to grow without having some structure in place. So we started growing heavy by the burden of our own booming project, and development slowed to a crawl. So then a contributor decided to take a path of least resistance with the support of some really motivated peers, and the fork occurred. Dun, dun, dun. And that was in January 2015, so IO.js was released. And they aim to provide faster and predictable releases. It was also under an open governance model as opposed to corporate stewardship. And around that time, Rod's open source policy paved the way for a much friendlier model to getting contributors, contributions merged and becoming a collaborator in open source projects, which was really, really powerful. And I think we've heard a number of stories for that as well. So February, the very next month, Joyent, the corporate steward of the project at the time, and then owner of the Node IP, announced the formation of the Node Foundation at Node Summit. I was like, that's really quick. It's only a month later. But foundation formation is not quick. And Joyent had been working with the community through the meeting of an advisory board for several months to try and alleviate the pressure for the community around governance. By March, the bylaws were drafted and being circulated. And that was also to an interesting mix of companies and community. But it took until May for the IOTC to vote to enter the Node Foundation and merge with Node. And that's not a bad thing. That's a lot of consideration and back and forth and making sure that we're all doing the right thing, right? So in June, we see the official launch of the Node Foundation with founding corporate members, followed by the board of directors being established. The first ever Node Collaborator Summit occurred, and that joined many of the collaborators, including back from the fork, in one place. So the result of these months of tough conversations, diplomacy, and pull requests was the release of Node v4 in September 2015, and that was the convergence. So what's the point? What's the power of this convergence? It combined the stability of corporate support with the much more in the community technical decisions being made liberally. And still, again, hard to believe with that governance though, that it's actually freed a bit from processes. So that was really exciting. And so what is Node now? It's over 1,000 contributors to date. It's 27 corporate members and many more individual members. 171 chapters of Node School around the world. It's Node Bots with the countless international Node Bots Day events that happen annually and the meetups popping up globally. It's Node Together, which welcomes a more diverse set of beginners to Node and happened in more than 7 workshops for 2016, including places like Bangalore. It's Node to Do and Code to Learn, where in the EU we saw over 40 PRs in one day session in teaching folks how to contribute to Node Core for the first time. And it's the thousands of meetups and conferences happening around the world where people get excited and nerd out on Node. It's parts of the world that many of us aren't connected to or don't stay up late enough or get up early enough to collaborate with. And all of this is done by the added parts working together to be greater than the whole. So in order to do that, it means we're all collaborating and we need to feel the agency and safety to contribute. We have millions of people in the Node community who are essentially unfamiliar coworkers walking the halls of GitHub, and we've had very little prior interaction with one another. So we are humans and we can have very different motivations. And this can add up to an energy-tense environment that we have to tread very thoughtfully through with care and respect. We as community members drive the values of the Node project forward, and that's through the ways we interact with one another in person and online. So we're a global community with colliding cultures and belief systems, and ultimately we're interacting because we're all trying to get our jobs done or follow through with our passions. It's that simple, but none of this is easy. So for many of us, privilege is an invisible thing we've been socially programmed to remain unconscious of. In the US and many parts of the world, this privilege, though you did not ask for it, could be being white, or being male, or being born to a family with money. So for others who are not advantaged, it can make daily work or just existing in our community pretty tiring or even painful. It is silent imbalances of power. There's a great anecdote from Francesca Ramsey of Decoded. It's often when we talk about privilege, a common rebuttal is, I can't be privileged, I grew up poor. But being disadvantaged in one area doesn't negate privilege in others. A good example of this is talking about white privilege. So white privilege does not erase the existence of poor white people or the challenges they face due to their class, nor do discussions of white privilege erase the harmful stereotypes of being poor and white. So then the question to ask for all of these imbalances as we become aware of them is, what will I do personally to lessen or end it? By acting on our awareness of these imbalances and continuing to grow the positive efforts of collaboration in our ecosystem, we can build an even more concrete foundation to which Node will be a more awesome place to code. So as you've heard over the last 2 days, the foundation is a number of groups collaborating to grow and maintain the health of the Node project, ecosystem, and community. It's the TSC along with countless numbers of working groups, the board, execs, and the community. So within each of these groups are responsibilities to improve Node leveraged by the expertise of them participating. A few months back, some of these groups began a new dialogue around the Inclusivity working group and what it means to be working on inclusivity and diversity in Node. The same process that allowed the technical side of our project to grow and thrive was seemingly stalled for cultural safeguards. Maybe that process didn't quite fit. So I was tasked with investigating the migration of the Inclusivity Working Group responsibilities potentially to the Node Foundation or the executives board from the TSC. It was simply an investigation. It wasn't a mandate to do that. This was in the hopes of addressing concerns for a lot of good-energied folks that ultimately had similar priorities, but vast differences in implementation details. And that could have been from strong differences of opinion, lack of understanding, or difficulties in communication. And that made it increasingly difficult to put these needs into actions. So I researched, as I do, and I read and asked for past history and conflict from as many people in the community that I knew were having a hard time with these struggles. I looked to other projects for the struggles they had seen and how they tried to help unite collaborators. But we don't always get the luxury of someone else setting precedents. So I'm going to start by laying out a few definitions, and I'm going to walk into the inclusivity proposal that I came up with as a result of this year. So inclusivity in this context means feeling supported and heard. It is the intention and policy of including people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized to create a productive work climate of trust and respect. And diversity means diversity of background, of thought, of perspective for everyone who wants to take part or maybe don't know yet that they want to take part but should feel that they want to when they discover it. So the first strategy that I came up with was the addition of a top-level community organization alongside the TSC. So that means that there are a number of organizations that have absolutely contributed, as I've already mentioned, to the growth of Node. There's Node School, there's NodeBots, there's 1,000 of individual meetups, there's conferences. This is not an exhaustive list. It's clear that the community activities, such as events, fall outside of the realm of the code that TSC oversees, and these are vital to the life and energy that we feel as we grow the project. So alongside this, this is giving a voice to our community members. This is a challenge because we're not saying we're going to take over all of these amazing organizations that exist in the community. This is very different than what the TSC ends up representing. So what we're doing here is giving voice and representation to all of these community projects. And that voice would then be carried through by the individual membership directors sitting on the board. So they would represent the community organization on the board. So that was what I felt was necessary in order to sort of get this first idea off the ground, and one being that Inclusivity Working Group needs to move over to that newly established organization. So draft charter's been made and is being worked on. The next step in this is educating our leadership. So I looked into diversity training, and we talked to a number of consultants and vetted them in order for the board of the Node Foundation and potential other leaders of the Node Foundation to set the bar. So what that also means is that we're going to be looking for gaps in our efforts from someone's professional lens, and they're going to help us with outreach and initiatives that will help give the Node Foundation perspective on being a leader in the open source community and tackling these incredible challenges. The next one is peer mediation. So many conflicts in the communities are members faced with a lack of perspectives, as much as it is folks who are not educated in managing or resolving conflict. Peer mediation documents provided as resources to encourage healthier communication for collaboration can help alleviate much of the stress we see in our GitHub and chat channels. The power of peers resolving conflict cannot be underestimated. Providing workshops alongside other community events has been requested, and it would be a great model to set forth in open source and even in most workplaces. The next strategy would be to look at our communication channels as they exist. So we have to ensure that we have a trusted, moderated space we can send new folks to. And currently, when I am asked, or anyone within our group that's asked where to go when someone is joining, we do not send them to a space that is not covered by the code of conduct. And to alleviate discoverability issues for those new folks, for people who are trying to find online channels for community collaboration, we had to be able to look at that. So of those options, we've got established channels already. We've got IRC, we've got Slack. GitHub's not going anywhere. And so we have our favorites. IRC has been around for a really long time. If you've ever participated in the hashtag Node.js channel, you know that there are a lot of people in it. So the proposal there is to clean it up. So we know that our community exists and knows to go to IRC, but we need to be able to do things like list them out on Node.js.org. And part of listing it out on Node.js.org is that we have to feel that the code of conduct is being applied there. And we have some great moderation rules that need to be pull requested and joined with our code of conduct. And then we would also need, as part of those channels being listed out, we would need them to agree to applying those rules to their channels. So we have to make sure that those spaces are actually being protected by the code of conduct that is listed there. And there are problems around that as well. So we would want to make sure that logging is also happening for those channels, so that if somebody does report that the folks who are moderating will have the means to exercise on that. The other option here is Slack, and there are already also existing Slack channels. The problem is discoverability there. So it's really hard to find those. And sometimes they're private, and that's fine. Slack can be really welcoming. I've seen a lot of communities that never felt comfortable existing in IRC joining Slack and having a really rapid growth, because it's so easy and it's also fun to engage. The problem being it's not really open. So you have to set it up as open by default by adding things in like a sign up. And in this instance, the only sign up would be you agreeing to the code of conduct. The flip side of that is that it also allows you to know who's signing up. So something like IRC you can cloak, although I'm sure people can tell me ways around this later, and it's harder to track people down when there's bad actors. So there's things to look into there. And then another one we have is, and this is more from the foundation side, but it's prioritize seeking a diverse range of candidates for both hiring and vendors. So we have to lead in prioritizing inclusivity and diversity in every facet of the organization. Many of our corporate members have been doing this for years. So there are countless papers that support how beneficial to our internal and external organizations it would be to raise our bar for hiring there. And I'm happy to provide that later. Finally, the last strategy that I find really exciting and means I can do a lot more in the future, and we all can, is set reasonable goals. And in order to do that, we have to have data. So in order for us to, increasing representation in demographics and backgrounds that are underrepresented globally, we have to know what is underrepresented. We can't know where we stand without knowing where we're at. So moving forward, all of our surveys are going to be much more comprehensive in order to gauge what needs to be improved. Oh, my link is gone. We're making a lot of assumptions right now based on anecdotal observances. And so in future years, we're going to be able to tackle much more specific challenges based off of these results. So we're going to publish those findings when appropriate to share our potential successes and also our failures, because it's a slow needle to move. And we have to talk about these things so that other people can also learn from them. That said, all of this is open for discussion. These were the findings from my investigation, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So we still need input, and it's going to be published, and all of the implementation details still need to be put forth. So we're going to be talking about this during Collaboration Summit, during the Inclusivity Working Group session, and I hope you'll join me there. Well, why am I explaining all of this? All of this is because we need help, and so much help. There's so much work for the Node project, and it benefits us all. It's really awesome to get to celebrate where we're at so far. And in order to welcome more people in, we've got to clean up what we've got. So to say we feel grateful for the things that we do have, that's great. It also means we're aware of our blessings. It does not discount the problems that we're facing. But we do want to say thank you to the working groups and core and Node School and NodeBots and Node Together and all of these community conferences in the community for the hard work that they're doing, and they're learning through these experiences what works and what doesn't. A community can mean the difference for maintainership, stabilization, and new innovation. And like so many in open source, I find myself needing help for all of the things that I can dream up. So we're doing a lot of work, right? We're each doing a lot of work for one person. There's got to be room to ask for help, and that's why we're doing that now. We must create the space for others to help. So that user group in Oregon, it's grown, it's changed. There's other awesome JavaScript and Node meetups happening too. The organizers went on to work at NPM, at Node Foundation, at New Relic, at the Apple, I totally messed that up, the Fruit Company. Erase that. Sorry. I shouldn't have said that. Many of our attendees were finally able to also get jobs in Node for the first time, and that was really exciting for them, and it's been really empowering, and that's just one story. It's been repeated across the world. I've sat on conference talk panels where every single person had their start or early awesome experiences with NodeBots, and it had kept us going. We ran our first International NodeBots Day in Portland, and we saw how excited people got about hacking on hardware long before they knew that was even a thing in JavaScript. We ran countless Node schools, talk nights, and hack nights. People joked about cat herding, and it was stressful, but it was also always fun. And I wouldn't be here today on stage if it wasn't for Ben Acker, and I wouldn't have this job if someone hadn't given me the space to help and supported a super friendly environment for all of us to grow in. So I look forward to growing the community that was so welcoming to me. I hope I can provide the same Southern welcome that Ben afforded me, and I think that's a great legacy to protect and grow. Thank you.